In 1945, an Egyptian farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Samad was digging for fertilizer in a cave near a town called Nag Hammadi. He hid a sealed jar. Local legend said jars like that sometimes contain spirits. He broke it open anyway. Inside, 13 leather-bound codices, 52 texts, some of the oldest documents in the world, unseen since the 4th century. The church had been very thorough. The same year, the liberation of the camps, the end of the Great European Civil War, the first nuclear weapons tested in the New Mexico desert, a species confronting all at once that it was capable of ending itself. I don't think that's a coincidence. I can't prove it isn't, but the big finds, the texts that change what we know, the archaeological moments that punch a hole in the official story, they tend to cluster at hinge points, when something is ending, as if something is being returned for safekeeping. The Nag Hammadi texts give us a picture of the ancient world that 2,000 years of institutional history has been at pains to obscure. A world full of competing maps of what happens after you die, a remarkable degree of convergence on certain specific ideas. Tonight, we will follow one of those ideas. It is the oldest argument in the human record, and it goes like this. Death is not a wall. It's a door. That door has a route on the other side. That route has landmarks. The landmarks have guardians. The guardians have names, and if you know the names before you arrive, you have a fighting chance. That's not a metaphor. That's operational doctrine. It shows up in Egypt 3,000 years before Christ, in Tibet and Greece, in the Orphic tablets buried with the dead in Sicily, and the accounts of people who have clinically died and come back, and the classified reports of U.S. military remote viewers asked, in the 1980s, to map territory that no satellite could reach. The map is real. The question is who drew it. I'm John. This is Conspiracy Slop. Start with the Egyptian material because it's the most detailed version of the map that we have. The Egyptians didn't have one word for soul. They had components, more like an operating system with separate processes than a single thing that you either have or you don't. 3 of them matter the most for what we're talking about tonight. The Ka is the life force, sustained throughout life by food, breath, the attention of the living. After death, the Ka needs to be sustained by offerings. This is why Egyptian tombs have false doors. The Ka passes through them to receive what the living leave. Not symbolically. The door is a physical interface between states. The Ba is closer to what we'd call individual consciousness, personality, memory, the specific texture of who you are. It is depicted as a human-headed bird because it travels. At night, it descends into the Duat, the underworld, to reunite with the Ka and the body. If the body is destroyed, the Ba becomes homeless. It wanders. It becomes dangerous, not from malice, but from desperation. A Ba without an anchor is the Egyptian version of a hungry ghost. The Ak is what you become after a successful transformation. Not what you start as, what you earn if you navigate the system correctly. The Ak is translated as effective spirit. That word matters, effective. The Ak can act on the world, influence events, operate in a domain that ordinary living people can't access directly. You don't die an Ak, you become one through a process. So, life force, individual consciousness, effective spirit. 3 components that disperse at death and need to be kept coherent through the transition. The work of the Egyptian afterlife system is exactly that, preventing the dispersal, navigating the components through the Duat, reassembling them on the other side. The body is the anchor for this. Mummification is not preservation out of sentiment. It's maintaining a habitable residence for the Ba to return to. The Ba needs to recognize the body. If it decays beyond recognition, the system fails at the first step. This is practical engineering. Someone figured out that these components need specific conditions to function. They built a technology around those conditions. They refined it over 3,000 years. The question I keep coming back to is, how did they know? The Duat, the Egyptian underworld, is not hell. It's a processing environment. A transitional space with specific geography, specific inhabitants, and specific rules. It has 12 stages. The dead make the same nightly journey as the sun god Ra. The maps were painted on the walls of royal tombs. The point was not decoration, the point was orientation. You need to know what you are walking into. The structure is consistent. Entry, verification that you're actually dead, a series of tests measuring the integrity of your soul components, encounters with chaos forces that would unmake your structure entirely, and then the transformation. At the 9th stage, an island of fire, where purification and rebirth happen simultaneously, at the intersection of destruction and origin. The Egyptians placed transformation specifically there, not after punishment, not as reward, the place where those two things meet. Throughout the journey, you'll need names, the specific names of guardians at each gate, words that bind the forces of chaos. This is not magic in the Hollywood sense, it's access control. The names are passwords. Without them, you don't pass. And this is where the Egyptian system stops being interesting as local history and starts being interesting as data, because the same architecture, navigable afterlife, named obstacles, passwords, and transformation through ideal all show up elsewhere, independently, far away. Tibet. The Bardo Thodol, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Written down in the 8th century, but drawing on older traditions, it describes 3 phases after death, and is meant to be read aloud to the dying and to the newly dead. Not because it's comforting, but because they need to know what they are about to encounter. The second Bardo, the Chanyid, is where the peaceful and wrathful deities manifest. Beings of light and beings of terror appearing in sequence. The instruction is always the same. Recognize what you are seeing. If you can name it as a projection of your own consciousness, it loses its power over you. If you react with fear and follow the beings offering easy guidance, you get pulled further down. The recognition is the mechanism of liberation. The parallel with the Egyptian password system is structural, not cosmetic. Both say, know what you'll encounter before you encounter it. Both say, the names and appearances can be learned in advance. Both say, your capacity to recognize what's happening in the moment determines where you'll end up. 6,000 miles apart. No documented contact. The same operating principle. Greece. The Orphic gold tablets. Tiny strips of gold foil found in graves from Thessaly to Sicily, dating from around 450 BC. Placed on the body of the dead, sometimes in the mouth, sometimes on the chest. They contain instructions. You will find a spring on the left, and standing by it a white cypress. Do not approach the spring. They give you the password. I am a child of earth and starry heaven. They tell you which water to drink and which to avoid. The wrong spring is lethe, forgetting. The right spring is mnemostene, memory. Drinking from memory is what preserves your identity through the transition. Someone spent real effort on these. They're tiny. The writing is nearly microscopic on some of them. They're buried with specific people, initiates, people who have received instruction in life so that they could use them in death. The Egyptian system, the Tibetan system, the Orphic tablets, 3 independent traditions, 3 different symbolic vocabularies, the same core claim. The route can be learned. Preparation changes the outcome. The names matter. When 3 sources agree on something this specific, you have 2 choices. Either the human brain, confronted with death, independently constructs the same detailed navigation system every time, which would require itself some explanation, or they're describing something perceived as real. The centerpiece of the Egyptian system, the Hall of Two Truths. Your heart, the Ib, the seat of consciousness and moral memory, is placed on one pan of a scale. On the other pan, the feather of Maat. Maat is not mercy. Maat is cosmic alignment, the way things actually are beneath the way that they appear. The feather is weightless because truth, in the Egyptian worldview, is the baseline. It costs nothing to tell it. It costs everything not to. If your heart is lighter than the feather, you become an Ak. If it's heavier, if you've accumulated what the Egyptians call isfet, moral disorder, the weight of actions against righteous order, your heart is thrown to Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus. She devours it. You suffer the second death. Not torment, cessation. You stop existing. The record is erased. Before the weighing, you make the negative confession to 42 assessors. 42 statements. I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. This is not a claim of perfection. It is a demonstration of knowledge, that you understood the rules, that you knew what Maat required, that you knew when you were moving against it. The Egyptians did not expect perfection. They expected consciousness. Here's what people don't talk about enough. The Egyptians built in a workaround, the scarab of the heart, an amulet placed over the mummy's chest, inscribed with specific words from the Book of the Dead. It instructs your heart not to testify against you in the weighing. The Egyptians had a spell to silence your own heart during judgment. This bothers scholars because it seems to contradict the ethical framework. But I think the Egyptians were working with something more sophisticated than simple reward and punishment. The scarab doesn't silence everything. It silences the testimony that doesn't belong to the essential self. The weight of circumstances, coercion, trauma, things that happened to you rather than things that you chose. The weighing measures character, not history. The wealthy had better scarabs. That's a problem that the system never fully resolved. The Nag Hammadi texts change the picture. Not by disputing the map, they don't. They dispute the nature of the beings that you'll meet on it. The Gnostic tradition describes a series of nested realms presided over by entities called Archons. The word means rulers. They rule the intermediate states between the individual soul and whatever lies beyond them. They are not guides. They are not running a transformation curriculum. They are, in the Gnostic account, jailers. The demiurge who made the material world believed himself to be the supreme god. He was wrong. He was an intermediary being, himself limited, himself operating at a remove from the actual divine source, which he was either unaware of or actively hiding from his subjects. The Archons, his subordinates, have a specific interest in keeping souls cycling through matter. Their power depends on souls not getting out. The most precise element of the Gnostic doctrine is what they call the counterfeit light. When you die, the Archons know you're coming. They appear in the post-mortem realm as beings of light, speaking comforting words, offering guidance. If you don't have the gnosis, the direct personal knowledge of your origin, you'll follow them. You'll mistake their light for the genuine article. You'll be guided back into incarnation, stripped of memory, and the cycle continues. Now go back to the Orphic tablets. Written centuries before the Gnostic texts, although Orphic practice and Gnostic religion is often intermixed in the classical world, they say, you will find a spring on the left. Do not approach this spring. The spring on the left is lethe, forgetting. It is offered first. It looks like what you need. The tablets warn, don't drink. Continue to namasyane. Memory. Two traditions, separated by centuries and geography, warning against the same specific mechanism. A form of post-mortem deception that depends on the soul not recognizing what it is encountering. The defense is identical in both. Know the map before you arrive. Recognition is the protection. The Egyptian system assumes the guides are operating within Maat, that even Osiris is bound by the cosmic order, that the scale cannot be fixed. The Gnostic system says the scale can absolutely be fixed. The same map, read by people who came to vastly different conclusions about who built it and why. Both are probably partially right. The same territory, serving different functions at different levels with different intentions behind different guides, which is either reassuring or the most unsettling thing I've said tonight, depending on where you end up and who you meet along the way. Ingo Swann was one of the primary architects of the US military's remote viewing program, the classified operation that ran for 23 years or longer under various code names, testing whether human consciousness could be used for intelligence collection. His results at the Stanford Research Institute were documented well enough that the Army and the CIA funded the program for decades. Swann believed remote viewing worked because consciousness was non-local, not generated by the brain, but received by it. The brain acts as a filter, or receiver, rather than as the source, which has an implication. If consciousness is non-local, if it is in some sense larger than the physical system that contains it, then death is not the end of consciousness. It's only the end of the filter. You stop having the thing between you and everything else. Whether that's liberation or catastrophe depends on what everything else turns out to be. The Gnostics had an opinion about that. Raymond Moody published Life After Life in 1975, the first systematic treatment of what he called the near-death experience. He'd interviewed 150 people who had been clinically dead and resuscitated. What he found was not darkness and ending, it was structured experience, consistent across cases, across cultures, across people who had no prior exposure to the concept. The element that matters the most for tonight's presentation, the life review. Multiple independent accounts describe a rapid presentation of the entire content of the life just ended. Not a highlight reel. Everything experienced simultaneously from multiple perspectives, including the perspectives of the people you affected. You feel what they felt because of what you did. The emotional weight of your choices, as experienced by others, is made directly available to you. That is the weighing of the heart, not metaphorically, structurally, a mechanism for presenting the moral content of a life in a form that cannot be rationalized. You don't just know what you did, you feel the weight of it from the outside. The scale doesn't lie because the experience doesn't lie. The Egyptians mapped this out 3,000 years ago. Moody's subjects came back from clinical death and described it without knowing that they were reading from a document they had never seen. The map agrees across independent sources. The route, the named obstacles, the password system, the judgment mechanism, the warning about the false guide, the importance of recognition. These appear in Egypt, Tibet, Greece, the Gnostic texts, the near-death literature, the classified remote viewing sessions. The convergence is too specific for coincidence and too consistent for cultural contamination. The Orphic tablets warning about the left spring and the Gnostic warning about the counterfeit light are the same warning, centuries apart from people who didn't talk to each other. There are two ways to explain this. The first, human mind confronted with death constructs the same map every time because the map reflects the structure of the mind rather than any external territory. That would itself require explanation. Archetypes don't typically produce specific passwords. The second, that the territory is real. The map is consistent because there's something to the map. Multiple traditions through multiple methods, initiation, vision, clinical death, coordinate remote viewing, independently accessed the same space and described what they found. If the territory is real, the maps were drawn by people who'd been there. And if people who had been there had enough detail to provide navigation instructions, then transmission of that knowledge was organized. Someone was teaching it. Someone had a reason to want the living to know what to expect after death. That reason could be entirely generous. Here is what we found. Prepare yourself. Or it could be something that the Gnostics would recognize. The question of who's giving you the map and where they're steering you with it is the one question none of the maps can answer from the inside themselves. The map is real, at least I think the map is real, and the fact that it keeps getting redrawn by people who don't know that they're retracing it is the most important piece of data to the whole puzzle that we have. I'm John. This has been Conspiracy Slop. The journey continues.